Welcome to Mystical Musings podcast, where we explore the intersection of spirituality, personal growth, and empowerment. In this episode, we will dive into a fun topic with spirituality and sexual exploration with our guest, Gina Garris, who is a lover of love. She has infused her life with sharing about love, sexuality, and all the beautiful gifts it brings. She is a healer, teacher, and mentor. Gina thrives on facilitating sexuality and sacredness and inviting more playfulness into our lives. Let's journey together to explore this spicy and tantalizing subject. Hi, Gina. Welcome.
Hi, Trina.
The first time I met Gina was we explored a class on oils and sexuality, and it was such a fun and engaging class. My students really loved it, and it was just a different perspective on things. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Gina, and what led you onto this medicine path with exploration of love.
Yeah, thank you. I've really been on this path my whole life. I got in trouble when I was about 3.5 from my preschool teachers for showing my friends how to soothe themselves, i.e., touching themselves in a pleasurable way. And so I tease that I've been teaching people how to self-pleasure my whole life. I think that this sex priestess, these sexual lineage teachings have been passed down for lifetimes. I think it's something that I've lived over and over and over. And yeah, it's just something that's always been in me. And I'm not exactly sure, don't need to know how or why, but I've just always been the person that people have come to talk about sex.
Oh, that's amazing, right?
Mhm.
I think it's a
Yeah.
subject that people tend to shy away from. It depends, like when they're exploring their shadow side, I think it's more hidden. It's not out in the open and so free of this giving permission that it's okay to explore this because it's a huge piece of who we are, right?
Yep.
So you work with the erotic embodiment and erotic blueprint. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the embodiment work that I do, it stems from our eroticism. And so it's just tapping into the parts of ourselves that it's really just taking a look at our eroticism, which I believe is the core vibration of who we are. I believe that our life force is the erotic resonance. And so many humans have turned it off, or there's shame, or we've been shamed to not express, to not be living in that fullness of their aliveness. And so the work often is just uncovering and then getting into how can I be more of that? And the erotic blueprints is a tool that I use that helps. We get to fine tune and learn how you're erotically wired. So, what are the ways in which you find your turn on and your arousal? And we can talk more about that later if you'd like.
Oh, no, I'd love to explore it now.
Yeah,
Like, like who doesn't wanna know their blueprint
right.
or their erotic like, what brings in that pleasure, that joy, that sensuality into your life? So, yeah, let's
Yeah,
explore that now.
great. So, my teacher Jaya has been studying for, I don't know, 35 plus years. I've been mentoring with her for 10, 15 years. And she started to notice just these pathways that humans had. And so there's 5 blueprints, and I'll just go through them really quick. There's the energetic, and energetics really need space and tease and anticipation. They also need safety and connection to find or be in their arousal. The shadow side of an energetic blueprint is that they can disconnect almost immediately, and they can't find arousal if there's no connection. So safety and connection is super important for the energetic. Their superpower is that they can basically have energetic full body orgasms without even being touched. So I don't know if our listeners have ever experienced like butterflies when they're first kissing or first meeting someone. That's a sensation that an energetic has access to all of the time through their arousal. So it's really fun to play with an energetic.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, and I love that space that you just said. It's a space of safety, and I think that's really important for everybody. We don't talk about that, and I think sometimes in society, I see a little bit like when I look at some of these younger generations, I see a disconnect with sexuality and how intimate and how sacred this connection is,
Yeah.
right?
I don't disagree, and I would say that I see that in all ages.
Yeah, that's true.
In
That's
all
true.
ages.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the
True,
next
true, true.
the next blueprint is the sensual blueprint, and the sensual blueprint is they're turned on by really all the 5 senses. So candles and oils and scents and soft touches and beauty all around them is really a turn on. And they can orgasm through food, through music, through really just all of the senses being activated. One thing for essential is that they need a toggle. They need to relax before they can get into their arousal. So in society, we're taught that women are like this. Women are crock pots. But the reason I love this tool is that it takes out the binary because there's so many humans that are sensual, the sensual blueprint, but are stereotyped that they're the sexual, which I'll get to in a minute. And so one of the superpowers with the sensual blueprint is that you can really orgasm with your food, with music, just be in full body orgasm pleasure. They need a toggle, so they need a massage or a bath or something to be able to get into their fullest state of arousal. And one of their shadow sides is that they can get in their head, or the orgasm is elusive. So you're almost there, and then it slips away. And then you have to start over. And then and so that's one of the shadow sides.
Absolutely. So with that shadow piece, is it always about learning how to get out of your head with that piece there? Like, is it through meditation? Is it through mindfulness? Is it through breath work? What is those pieces that help them to kind of get out of that head space?
Yeah, I love this question. And my answer is probably not the most helpful because once you meet an erotic being, you're literally just meeting a brand new erotic being. We are all wired so differently. We're snowflakes.
Oh
We're
yeah.
so unique. We're so unique. And so to get out of your head, the first place to notice is like, oh my gosh, that's me. Wow. I need to relax. I love foreplay. I have to have all that before I'm ready. And the first thing is just the awareness of it, and then start to play and map your own arousal of what does get me out of my head. What are the things? Like some people, if there's socks on the floor, if the house is dirty, if there's dishes in the sink, they literally can't relax. And so knowing that about yourself, you get to set yourself up to win,
Mm-hmm.
right? So a lot of the sensuals that I work with, they just know, okay, we're going to have a sex date, or if I'm going to do this, these are the things that I need to set myself up. Yeah. And when we get to the end, I'll talk about the philosophy of, well, I guess I'll just do it now because it's here. My philosophy is that you are the only one responsible for your pleasure. No one else is responsible for your pleasure. So if you come to the relationship fully fed, then there's no grassiness, there's no neediness, there's no need to like get somewhere because you come to the relationship, you come to your sexuality full. And so feeding yourself is one way to train yourself to stay out of your head. So it's noticing acceptance and then mapping to find out what works for you.
So when you say feeding yourself, what does that look like? For me, I envision like you working on your emotional, mental, and physical body, that you bring in a balancing to all of those pieces. It's just not one with the sexuality. It's like the wholeness of everything that you're working on.
Mm, I love that. I feel like that tends to be more of a, let's see, that would be, to me, what I hear you saying that I resonate with, that's me, how I live with my life and feeding the fullness of my life. If I'm specifically feeding my erotic blueprints, I'm going to take a look first at what is my one leading blueprint. And then are there starving blueprints? And so there's a system of just fully knowing yourself and feeding yourself. So, for example, feeding your sensual blueprint could be that you have rituals that are like magical baths, or you do things to feed your sensual self. For me, I'm generally wearing, and don't wear anything that's scratchy. I wear clothes that are delicious, they're buttery, they hang off my shoulder because it feels good. I love to see it, right? So I feed my sensual blueprint by where I live. My temple is gorgeous. Um, those are ways in which I feed mine. You can also do sensuals have beautiful self-pleasure practices because they're not genital focused generally. It's literally just, you know, fur, fur on your skin or
Skin.
softies. So
That's soft, sacred touch,
yes.
like that just stimulates the senses,
Hmm.
stimulates the skin, and it brings in all that ooey gooey feelings,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I love it. So what are like when you're saying feeding yourself, like I talked a little bit about how I feed myself and how you feed yourself. How do have you seen other people feed their selves too?
Hmm. Well, it really depends on the blueprint. So an energetic, energetics can do yoga, meditation, quiet time, just stillness can be extremely feeding and arousing. Space is huge for energetics to come back. Lots of HSPs or highly sensitive persons or empaths or energetics. And as you know, we can get overstimulus, right? So coming back into you is one of the ways to feed yourself so you can be available to connect, to be available for your turn on and arousal to arrive. And once you know, like if this is resonating with everyone, it's like, oh my God, I thought I was broken. I'm an energetic shapeshifter. So I thought I was broken until I found these teachings because I needed so much space. I needed to go so slow. And there's a map once you know and start to work with the blueprint. So I'm like energetic, sensual, kinky, energetic, shapeshifter, energetic. And then you can get to the sexual where someone can have access to my genitals. So my map is not just, oh, let's rub some oil on you and then make love.
We're the
Yeah.
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 I For me, I need a huge mental and emotional connection with
Hmm.
someone. For that's, for my expression. Part of my map, as you would say.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
like yeah. And so we talked about the first two. What is the third blueprint?
Yeah. The third blueprint is sexual.
Mm-hmm.
And the sexual blueprint is really what our culture has taught us what sex is, which is like genital to genital, penis inside of a vagina, that kind of sex. It's like you come together, you have sex, you have an orgasm, super successful if you both orgasm at the same time, and then you're done. So the sexual blueprint is a beautiful blueprint. And there's lots of sexuals out there, and there's lots of humans who aren't sex. So part of coming into your erotic essence is really unlearning everything we've learned about sex and expanding our definition of climax, orgasm, and sex. But the sexual blueprint is basically what everyone knows, which is this is what sex is. It's fun, it's easy. Go to it. You're hot to go right away. They love nudity. They like watching people. They like porn is feeding for the sexual blueprint. Yeah, so sexuals are fun because they're always game for sex. They love sex. They love to talk about it. They love to do it. Yeah, they want to do it all the time. If they're not getting it, they feel like they're dying. And so sexual blueprint humans are so great. One of their shadow sides is that they don't necessarily, the shadow side of a sexual blueprint is that they don't necessarily want to do or explore any other stuff. Because it's like, why do you need all that? Why do I need to rub you down? Why do you need to feel not necessarily safe, but why do we need to have connection? Like we've done this before and I'm ready to go. And why aren't you ready to go? Or you had an orgasm. I don't understand why you're not satisfied, you know? And so sometimes that's the shadow side of the sexual is that they just can't see past the outside the box of what sex is and can be.
Yeah. And I,
Yeah.
I loved what you said earlier because I literally say this to everybody out there that we are snowflakes and it's a
Mhm.
unique expression. Even our sexuality is that way. We're all so different and unique when it comes to our experiences, the way we were brought up, all of those pieces of our own inner piece of how that's expressed. I mean, I love that. And so it's learning like when we interact with someone to really understand we're dealing with that whole other blueprint or snowflake that you were just talking about, and hopefully giving a different perspective and look at that when we're interacting with someone, right?
Yeah, it's so great. And this tool, the erotic blueprints, is beautiful because it gives us a language. It gives us a language to communicate because energetics, you know, are speak a different language than sensuals than sexuals. The next blueprint is kinky, the kink blueprint, the kinky blueprint. And kinky is a little different. Sometimes people have a little about that word kink and kinky. And kinky is what is taboo for you. And so I always tell people if someone has sex in missionary position their whole time and they decide to try something different, like maybe doggy style something, that may be kinky for them. For me, doggy style with maybe 8 people is my kink because my edges are just a little bit different, right? And so I love I love to teach people that kink is literally just what's taboo. I'm turned on by what's taboo and what's taboo for you. It could be sex outside, which for someone else may be very natural or very energetically delicious and feeding. They might be an energetic, but for someone else, it might be really, really kinky. And so being kinky, quote unquote, kinky, doesn't necessarily mean that you're involved in BDSM or things like that. It's literally just what's taboo for you. So I love to make that point.
No, I love that because it teaches you what's your boundaries with sexuality, with your sexuality and the expression of sexuality, right? And I think that's a subject that is can be difficult to approach sometimes with partners, depending on the communication and the relationship and stuff like that. And what we've been taught, like you were saying, some of us, like I grew up strict Catholic school, you name it. The talk of sexuality and all that was, like, literally off the table. It wasn't something we talked about. Even about how my body functioned as a woman came from my friends. It didn't come from anybody else. I had to learn it all on my own kinda stuff. So, it's one of those things of giving yourself permission that this is something that's okay to explore,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
And to do it with this person that you feel safe with is the one of the ways that I say is a great way to start that exploration. And if they don't feel safe with one, this is where you come in to help kind of people be able to say, hey, this is where establish my blueprint so I can do and give myself permission for this exploration. Right.
Yeah, and I always say start with yourself, and that will lead me to the shadow side of the kinky blueprint, and that is shame.
Mm.
So, just knowing that Trina, we don't know for sure. I should have had you take the quiz before we started, but anyway, maybe that can be the next
Yeah.
episode is
Next
yeah.
episode. Yeah.
But you could be an energetic blueprint and also have the shadow side of the kinky blueprint. So many, many people have shame when it comes to around to sex, sexuality, and a lot of it is societal beliefs, religious beliefs, familial beliefs, the imprinting that we have been given. And
Trauma.
yes, trauma is a big one. Yep. And so working through shame is really often one of the first doorways that I'll work with humans. Most people are reaching out because I'm not having sex, I'm not having orgasms. I want to be more expressive. I'm having a block here. So often the doorway to me is through shame. And if you're listening and you have any shame or this feels uncomfortable, I can't believe you're talking about sex in public, you're not alone. I just want you to know you're not alone. And one of the first ways to bust through shame is to talk about it. And so finding a safe space to do that or listening to more podcasts like this really does help melt the parts of us that thinks this is not okay. It's not okay to talk about it, especially in public, right? Because we're doing a very taboo thing, you and I.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think in my experience and working with the clientele that I work with, they think it's separate and it's not. It's part of our whole physical, emotional, mental, spiritual being. It is ingrained and interwoven into those
Yes.
pieces, and it's not separate part of
Yes.
us. And we have to give ourselves permission that it's okay to have this expressive piece of us, but also learn, like you were saying, if we do have this, this makes me uncomfortable and I don't know. Why is
Mm-hmm.
that? And explore that because I had to do a lot of work on my inner self and shadow around the shame pieces and how that's
Yep.
expressed and make sure I don't imprint that onto my
Yep.
daughter. You know
Yeah.
I mean? Yeah, exactly. So it's giving yourself permission it's okay to
Yeah.
explore and the different ways you can explore it. And I loved how you say the first way to explore that is with
Hmm.
yourself. And so when you say that, what does that look like?
I want to go back to what you said that it's not separate. I love this so much. People, I know we're going to talk a little bit about sacred sexuality and what is it after we finish with the shapeshifter. That's next. But we are sacred beings. We are divine, sacred beings. And in that, you are sacred. We are sacred. Anything that, to me, anything we do with our bodies or with other people's bodies is an act of devotion and sacredness. So the first thing is really doing some inner work on what is sex? What is intimacy? Just taking a look at what are your own inner beliefs about it. Do I have fears? Do I have desires? A self inquiry is probably the first place I would start. And then the blueprints is amazing because you can figure out what is my blueprint and you can start to discover, like, oh, wow, what is my way to turn on? Or I really do get turned on when I'm seeing those two people kiss over there, but that's like not my orientation, or I don't understand that. And can you allow it to be there? One of the things I just love is like the permission. Can you allow that whatever turns you on is okay? And then, and like, you don't have to do anything with it. Y- Like, it- it's what turns you on. Awesome. It's so great.
Like it doesn't, I love that. You don't have to do anything with it. It's okay
Ooh,
to acknowledge that piece of yourself. It doesn't mean you
yeah.
have to like go out and explore that. Just to acknowledge that is like almost like a breath.
Yes. Yes.
Like breathe.
Yeah. I want to clarify that there's two branches of the kinky blueprint. One is psychological. And so that comes into a lot of fantasy and mind play and thinking about it. And so if you have thoughts or fantasies and they turn you on, that is on one level and can be a link to the kinky blueprint. And then the other version of the kinky blueprint is sensation. So that's when we get into sensation play with maybe constriction or dominance and submission. So some of that is also on the side of the sensation kinky blueprint.
Oh, okay. And so
Yeah.
we went through four. What's the fifth one?
And the fifth one is the shapeshifter. And the shapeshifter is where you're erotically wired really through all the blueprints. And so you have just this really beautiful access to arousal. I love to say that we're all actually shapeshifters at the core. In our sacred divine essence, we are born a true erotic, like Stradivarius, this beautiful musical instrument that can be played and aroused in all of the ways. And our conditioning and our traumas, I like to call them emotional STDs, shame, trauma, and drama.
I
Yeah.
love that. Emotional STD. I'm going to steal
Yeah.
that one, girl.
Shame, trauma, and drama. Through that, we're wired, right? So a lot of people who have trauma become energetic because they're highly sensitive. They can pick up on everything. And they need that safety to be able to relax to get into their arousal, right? And so I'm not necessarily saying anyone with trauma isn't energetic. I'm just saying that sometimes the way in which we were raised, I feel like puts us into the different pathways of the other blueprints. And as we start to explore and expand and shed layers and look at the shadow sides and give ourselves permission to fully open, I often find that my clients are like, wow, I really truly am a shapeshifter. I love all these different ways and can be met. One of the shadow sides of a shapeshifter is that because they're so, I don't want to say good, they have so much access to each blueprint, they can fall into a rut of pleasing their partner in the way of their blueprint. So they often feel really hungry. A shadow side is that they can get bored because they always want more. Like I know I meet a true shapeshifter when they're like, "Oh, well, we made love for like 4 hours and then we took a break." And I mean, I just don't know. I needed another session and they were done. And it's so when someone wants more and wants more and wants more, I often will go through and take a look at what are all of their blueprints getting fed. Because that can sometimes be a shapeshifter shadow. And sometimes it's hard with the shapeshifter if you're in a partnership because they do want more, and not all of their other blueprints have that access to be able to meet them
Mm.
fully.
So listening to you describe the blueprints and like how they move through them, this sounds like we can have several blueprints at one time, or we can kind of shift through them at a time. Do you find that true for most people?
Yeah, I feel like everyone has access. Like, if we look at this through the lens of archetypes, these are your erotic archetypes. So we have all of them. It's just
Mm-hmm.
which one is leading, which one are you most resonant with? And then are you willing to do the work to expand, to include, and get to know the other parts of you? And that's really the deep dives that we can do together is to dive into, see, a sensual shadow might be, I don't like any of the fluids. Like as soon as we're done, I need to get in the shower and totally clean up. I don't want fluids. The smells of
Mm-hmm.
sex, which for someone else might be such a turn on. So just showing you different places that, oh, that could be a sensual shadow. So like what could we do around working on that to expand your erotic
No,
capacity?
I like that erotic capacity. That's a
Yeah.
nice word. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what is sacred sexuality to you, Gina?
It's a loaded question. To me, everything is sacred. So anytime you're having sex, it's sacred in my book. I think there's a yeah, I think there's a spectrum. I think that you could have beautiful because we're sacred to me every time we're having sex or just in our erotic pleasure, just really just all the time we are in sacred sex. We're having sacred sex. But you can ritualize it. You can ceremony it. You can bring in deep intention. There's lots of traditions that have different positions that can bring in different things. And so to me, I'd actually rather ask the human, what is sacred sexuality to you? How would you make this be more intentional for your sacredness? Right? I can't really tell someone what sacred sexuality is for them because I don't know what they find to be sacred or meaningful, right? So the question is, okay, what would I like to do to make this sacred? And there's so many different ways. There's so many different things. Often I see this coming in through the sensual, energetic and sensual blueprint because it is often like candles, intention, breath together, journaling exercises, eye gazing before, it's like a whole beautiful buffet of an evening creating a sacred intention as you come into union with each other. And that's gorgeous. I want to say that if someone meets someone in a bar and goes in the bathroom and has sex with them, that's not any less sacred because we're sacred beings. And you can feel the difference and maybe even judgment of like, well, first of all, who's going to do that? Right?
Do
Like
yourself right now. Yeah.
listen to yourself right now,
What
right?
you
Like
becoming
what's happening
the
to
inner
you?
critic with?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And why?
Yeah. And even are you appalled that I would say that sex in a bathroom with someone you just met could be sacred, right? Like those are the most beautiful, beautiful places to really open the little doors and be like, wow, that's not right in my world. And can you take a deep breath and be like, I'm so curious. I wonder why I would think that's not sacred,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's a beautiful space because on the other side of the spectrum is, oh, okay, I don't think that's sacred for me, but I would think this is sacred. Can you start there and then do just a little bit more work on what is sacred? Like, why would it not be sacred? And that this comes into beliefs. So many beliefs of, well, you're not clean or you haven't bathed or, there's so many beautiful wisdom traditions that have protocols for sacred sex and ways in which you show up to the temple, ways in which you honor the goddess or you honor your bodies, you honor yourselves together. And that is beautiful. If you are into that, then go into your wisdom tradition and you find what are the ways in which this tradition makes love and finds union and brings it into ceremony.
I love that. Man, we can go into each little rabbit hole with each one. I appreciate your
We can.
perspective. That's why I wanted you on here because to me, your perspective is so much more open and explorative, and I love that. You opened up my world a few years ago of like, hey, pay attention to this, explore this piece of yourself. So I always appreciate that. So I want to thank you for that. I hope everyone took a little bit aha moments through some of this, like I did today with some of the blueprints and the exploration of that. So I appreciate you coming on. Thank you for being here. If you want to connect with Gina, you can connect with her at her website at blisscoach.com. Become our friends on social media. And don't forget, we have amazing metaphysical products and services on both of our websites. So connect with us. If you like this podcast, do a coffee or Venmo a friend us so we can continue to do this. And I have a feeling that Gina's going to be on here again of us exploring some of these other rabbit holes with sexuality and giving yourself permission to be that beautiful snowflake of expression with your sexuality. And just a reminder that a sexual embrace can only be compared with music and with prayer. So namaste, everyone. Thank you.
So good. Thank you. Bye bye.